Hello, everyone. Welcome into the latest episode of the SPYPOINT podcast. I'm your host, as always, Trent Marsh, joined today by Stephen Fuller from the Huntin Grounds. So we'll get into it a little bit. Deer season just around the corner. Obviously, you guys are all excited about it. I know I'm excited in theory. Stephen's excited, so we'll get into it. But of course, I want to remind everybody to rate, review, subscribe wherever it is you're consuming this podcast. Share it with your friends and let people know about the content that we're doing. Make it easier for other people to find. With all that out of the way, Mr. Fuller, how are we today?
I'm good. Busy, but good. It's like you said, we talked just a second beforehand. There's a lot of stuff going on right now.
Yeah.
Kind of got personal stuff, and then it's like, oh my gosh, deer season is pretty much upon us. So it's like, it's the time right now where you start going into panic mode, trying to make sure you're ready to go into the season to make season as best as it can be.
I was just looking at some of our information, and we're definitely seeing the spike. I think there's a big group of people that are year-round hardcore crazy fanatic, crazy
Right.
people about it, right? But then you've got a lot of other folks that maybe they tournament fish or a million other things going on, or just
Right.
family stuff keeps them busy.
Yeah.
They're not able to do it as much as they want. But I think it's anecdotally, but I think really, when that calendar turns to August, that ends up being the wake up call for, the back to school sales and getting, here we got school districts that are already back in or starting up here in the next few days, the next week. So with the kids going back to school, calendar turned to August, the wrap is kind of on summer, even though we're still 6 weeks away from technical fall. I think August at first is really kind of, it's that line in the sand for a lot of folks where, yep, okay, maybe I've had my cameras out, but not paying a lot of attention, or maybe I need to get my cameras out. The growth for the most part is over. They're going to be what they're going to be at this point, but now it's just firming up those antlers, velvet coming off here in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then we're kind of off to the races with season opening. So it's a long way away, and yet it's just around the corner. So it's busy.
I think it's what it is for me too. I think it's pure panic mode when I start seeing the buddies start posting their trail camera pictures online, and they're like, that's a pretty good buck, now they're fully developed, and you're kind of like, man, I've got to get on the game a little bit and start getting my cameras out there a little bit more and start finding some bucks. I mean, it's not a big worrisome to me at this point if I'm not having the bucks that I want to hunt on camera, because they're fixing to go through some very big changes, and they're gonna change a lot in their habits, and they're gonna change a lot on their areas that they're staying. So right now I'm still not in full panic mode, but I have started really putting those cameras out in some of those key properties. And but yeah, more so than even like, I don't know, I think what draws the line in the sand for me is when the buddies start posting a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
I want some of those for myself. So yeah, I get it.
For you, I don't know. I'm curious. I've talked about it in past episodes. I don't worry about not having buck pictures through the summer. That doesn't bother me in the least, especially knowing my properties.
Me neither.
But for our cameras and our properties, I'm seeing more buck pictures early this year across all properties. One, I know why, because there's some logging going on an adjacent property that's pushing some deer our way. But just in general, I'm seeing more buck pictures than usual. And not just the number of buck pictures, but the deer themselves. I've got more oddballs this year than I normally see. Just like jacked up on one side, or just something wonky. I mean, we always have a few of them running around, but it seems like, 30% of the deer, normally, the basket racks are the basket racks and all that kind of stuff. But even the younger deer, like, there's just a lot of weird antler development this year, and I have absolutely no idea why. I was just texting with another buddy of mine yesterday, and he's saying the same thing. He's like, well, the deer are just all wonky this year. So I don't know. Are you seeing the same thing? Are you starting to see bucks a little bit earlier? You seeing any difference in antler development, or is this just I'm living in some sort of weird voodoo land?
you might just be living in a weird spot. It's just weird. We've had a weird year this year. We had one of the worst record droughts that I can remember, forever. So I am seeing some of the bucks that I was expecting this year to hopefully blow up. I've seen them not even reach the potential that some of them were even last year.
Oh.
That's what I'm thinking. And so it's kind of sad about that. But, I know a lot of the country has had a drought. Maybe that's a factor that goes in when they don't have, extra resources pouring into their skeletal system. They're depending on what they've got. Who knows what that does or what stresses that they're going through out there.
We haven't been that bad. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost normal-ish. I don't know. It's bizarre. Well, so you guys were super dry then. Did you get hammered? I know like St. Louis and that whole area, they were having flooding and stuff, which is a little ways from you, but did you get in any of that heavy rain or did that stay north and west of you?
Yeah, it stayed north and west of me. We went easily over 2 months without a single drop of rain. It was the worst on the record for us. I mean, I planted my food plots and they planted perfect timing, perfect rainfall at the time, and then it got to where there's just no rain after, and they died. Like, I don't have any food plots in the ground right now. We'll go on. I want to tell you exactly about like what's that stuff from my property and how my property's doing with that. But we've missed all that rain, and so we did have. I mean, if you want to talk about trail camera pictures, we had, I'd say early on, had a lot of deer activity on the cameras, and then the drought hit, and I'm telling you. Nobody was seeing the bucks. I'll tell you something. I was driving with Mom the other day. People think it's a kind of a safari when you come into the hunting grounds. There's deer all over the place. Just middle of the day in the tree savanna. You can watch the deer and stuff. And I was like, one thing I have not noticed this year. I said we had a huge fawn crop early on, and then like I felt like predators came in and wiped around or something because I was not seeing a single fawn. Normally they're all over the roadsides until the rain recently. And then it's just like deer galore. The fawns have all showed back up. I think, the bucks were down in the cooler areas, down in the creek bottoms, in the shade, trying to find some of those little springs that had any kind of water. And I think the does were doing that with the fawns too, just keeping them down in the cool shelter. And I mean, we went weeks and weeks and weeks without even seeing a fawn. And now we've had a rain pattern the last 4 or 5 days, and it's daily. We're seeing, 10 plus fawns all over the place. So,
resources get that tight. I mean, I said, they need to stay tight to where they know they can be 100%. In it, but they can't be expending any more energy or resources out of their body than they know they can replenish. And if they can't find stuff, then it's going to get difficult everywhere. So, well, that kind of covers how your summer's been. It doesn't sound like the best on record for sure.
No, it's been rough.
So what, obviously that's a kind of the next thing I was going to ask is, what were you doing different? What changes were you planning to make for this year? And it kind of seems like you're having to pivot on the fly a little bit just with the food. I know food crops are such an important part of what you do there at the hunting grounds. Yeah. So with that total failure, how are you kind of sitting here, as we're talking on August 11th, how are you looking to kind of pivot from that and make a plan for hunting season then?
Well, I'll tell you, the biggest, I've kind of changed a lot of I still do a lot of the management techniques I've always done, but I've really, really focused on the native habitat on my property. And that saved me this year. Like food plots, literally, we're in the Ozark Hill country. Food plots have to be pretty much on top of ridges. We don't even have our hills are just point to point down in the bottom of the hollers. There's not valleys or big draws or anything like that. We're in my area. So food plots dried up with the amount of timber stand improvement I've done, prescribed burning. I've tried to do on my property is do a lot of tree savanna. And so you've got a lot of grasses and forbs and native vegetation all coming up underneath. And I will tell you, it's pretty cool to see this play out because I've watched it over the last couple of months and it's just mind blowing. But I probably have more deer on my property right now than if my food plots were like super green and lush right now. Because what's happened is everybody in the area, it's cattle country and it's woods and that's it. And so for me to have open timber where I have like tree savanna, I am pulling all the deer. And I mean, I have so much tonnage and vegetation in the woods. It's pretty remarkable. So that saved me this year as far as management techniques. That's one thing I'm really focusing on a lot more. I've always kind of done the food plots and stuff, but really improving the native habitat right now. And I'm going to continue doing that. And then coming in, hopefully I'm waiting for, I think next week we have a big change in temperatures. We're going to drop 10 degrees on average for the foreseeable future, starting early next week, which will put us in the 80s. Rain patterns start coming in. So now I'm going, okay, once I start seeing those rain patterns come in and they're steady enough, then I'm thinking I've got to start planting food plots. So I have to redo all my food plots this year. I've already started the process of spraying them. That way I can get like maybe 2 sprays on them, get a good kill. And then going in and we're doing some clovers and some of them, doing some wheat and rye and rape and turnips. And even my borders, I usually do like border patrol, and it's just it's sorghum variety mix that really allows for some buffers and stuff. And even those were hit. I don't even know if I'm going to get 4 or 5 feet out of those this year. Wow. Normally they're 6 to 12 foot plus tall, and so yeah, a lot's changing. But hopefully in the next, I'm going to probably start in the next week and a half, 2 weeks. I'll have all my food plots in the ground with the way the patterns are coming in. And a lot of people are asking me like, are you planting now? When are you going to plant? And I don't look on a calendar. I say, look on the forecast. You get those rain patterns that are consistent, it can grow, plant it at that time. So,
right. Well, and the one thing you touched on there is the timber stand improvement and encouraging those natives. And a lot of times it's just talked about from a diversity standpoint, do the food plots and of course mix in the natives. But one thing that I don't think gets talked about often enough is a summer like this with terrible conditions, drought conditions, and the farmed portion of it can't take that. Natives, 100%. The natives are native because they can take that. So you never have the impact on your native vegetation that you will on the crop style vegetation, because everything that's in your zone, everything that's a native to your area has existed and continues to exist there because it can take the heat, or it can take the cold, or it can take, whatever the case may be. You're never going to be as reliant on optimal conditions when you're talking 100%. About those natives. Has the Mast crop is one of those things that always kind of ebbs and flows, and sometimes you still get a decent Mast crop when it's depending on when you get the rains. Are you still looking like you're going to have a Mast crop, or did it take that out too?
I'm still up in the air on that. I will tell you, this has been such a bad drought. It's pretty cool. Like if you come through the Ozarks, take a look real carefully as you're driving through, on the highways. You'll see a lot of brown spots in the timber. I mean, really? Full grown white oak and red oaks not only are going, like, they aren't dormant, they have died. So either they're on rock chef ledges or something where there's just not a whole lot of soil, and they have completely died. So I've got a lot of trees that have just flat out died. And I kind of got some indicator trees on my place that are always the producers, if they're going to be big time producers. I checked out one of them yesterday. I call her the mother of oak trees, and there's not an acorn on it. She's a big white oak. And then I've got one in my front yard that always produces really well, and it's pretty loaded, but it's kind of up in the air right now. They were stressed, and I don't know if they're going to develop fully, drop early, or if they're just kind of hanging on dead. So we're going to have to play that by ear and then kind of see what happens there. But I will tell you, the food plots are going to be a huge game changer this year, because I will tell you, overall, if you look at it, when we started hitting our drought, that was early on, even when that vegetation was coming on in the woods. And so there's not any of that. It got hardy quick. And then what didn't, green up before the canopy came on, it just is not there. So there's not a lot of tonnage in the woods if you aren't doing management. And then pretty much everything else has been just killed off. So food plots will play a big role, probably definitely early on in the season this year, going on into late season for sure.
No, I mean, it makes sense when, the food plot situation that you have is the same food plot situation everybody else is going to have, which means even in areas, deer that aren't necessarily circulating onto the hunting grounds, when you got a widespread drought like that, all of those natives region wide are going to be what bears the brunt. And the earlier and early, it's one thing if we get to August and it's dry, but when it's dry in those late spring, early summer months, and they start having to turn to that native browse in June and July, and then by August they've already pulled it all out. Like you said, it's already picked. There's nothing there. So and especially if it's been that dry, I'm sure the farmers are in just as bad a shape in terms of yields and production, and crops are probably going to be out earlier than usual because it was a short season. So all those ag crops that are normally a crutch are going to be gone. I think you're probably right. Those and the cereal grains especially. If you can get some, I was going to ask specifically, and you mentioned if you can get some of that wheat and rye in there, greens up quick. Huge tonnage, just absolute nutritional bomb all the way through the growth cycle. Yeah, that would just hearing what you're dealing with, that would have been my go-to is let's just get as much as we can in that in that rye and wheat, because they'll live through that. So cool.
Yeah. That's definitely going to increase the amount of tonnage for sure on the food plots this year, because I know at this point, with the amount of deer we already have coming in on the property, it's only going to increase as we get into the fall. It always does. Normally, I see that increase later on into the hunting season, but I'm already seeing it right now, and it's only going to get worse.
So, and you kind of touched on it, you've done a lot of timber stand improvement, which, we talk about this so often, and maybe even some of the listeners are like, God, Trent, quit talking about it, sick of hearing about it. But, food plots get all of the attention, but I think I'm pretty sure I know what your answer to this question is going to be, but as you kind of look back, because how many years now have you been developing the habitat there at the Huntin Grounds?
I'm probably about 5 years in right now.
So you're 5 years in now. Yeah. What would you say has been the biggest, has made the biggest impact on the way that the deer are using that property then?
I'd first, I've always say it, people probably get tired of me saying it, but limiting factors first. I always go in, whether it's food or water, make sure you've got that. But I would say overall, the biggest game changer personally on my property would be going in and improving the native habitat. So that it'd be doing TSI and really going in, and I'm not just increasing like the value of my timber, but I'm reducing it pretty substantially to almost a tree savanna aspect, where you have a lot of sunlight coming down, and you've got these random oaks and stuff with a lot of grasses and forbs throughout the whole property. And doing that combination at the same time, you're kind of doing like the edge feathering, so you aren't having, my place was horse grazed area right up against timber. So you had mature great timber down to like 3-inch tall, grasses coming out. There was no transition zone in there, nothing for the turkeys to nest in, the deer to browse and bed in, and all that. So going in and improving that has been by far the biggest game changer, because like I said, for one, you're going in and that's a food plot you're making. I mean, that's tons of food on the table, and then it's habitat at the same time, bedding. It's increased the amount of deer drastically that I hold on my property. Also, the amount of bucks, I think a lot of times that's overlooked. When I first started doing it, I kind of started with pockets because it was just overwhelming to do the whole property at once. So I do pockets, and by doing pockets, it allowed, a buck to kind of be over this pocket and a buck to be over this pocket, where they kind of had their zones. They weren't able to cross paths really easily a lot, see each other a lot. And then I've tried to connect the dots basically and try to do the majority of my property that way. It's as far as turkeys and stuff too. I didn't even have turkeys on my place when I started. By going in doing this, I pull in all the hens during the springtime, because they know that I have the nesting grounds, where everybody else has just mature timber, cattle ran property that's grazed heavily. They flock here. So biggest game changer, TSI. It's cheap. It's easy. You get a chainsaw, literally a tank of gas.
It's sweat equity. Sweat equity.
I mean, you spend 2 hours and it's something that's going to pay off drastically, way more than going in and spending a lot of money pushing over trees, pushing in the food plot. Then you have a drought that year, like this year, you get no tonnage out of that. Whereas native vegetation, it would have been almost instant gratification.
Right. Yeah. What are your favorite, and obviously it's not going to apply to everybody, but then what are those natives that you're really trying to propagate in that? And what's kind of your top list? Again, it's going to vary in different regions, but if you could tell people, here's 2 or 3 native plants that you really either need to go out and bring onto your property intentionally, or at least promote growing on your property, what are your real go-tos? What are your favorites?
So I worked with a company. It was pure air natives. I got some seed from them, and I love that seed. It had a really wide variety of like switchgrasses and all that. And I kind of experimented on a piece of my property, starting with that. I wanted to do a tree savanna. Had never done it before. Didn't know how aggressive to really cut the canopy open. And then at the same time, sometimes like with on my property, I don't have a lot of great, some of these areas don't have a lot of great natives that just pop up. And so I went in and topically applied a mixture that had something that was growing up pretty much the way it was designed 365 days a year. So it's got a lot of the switch grasses. It's got a lot of flowering plants in it that I honestly don't even know the name of on those. But you're going to get, when you're on our property, you're getting a bunch of little blue stem. I will tell you, like, even going in and doing like the timber management I do, for the most part, I am cutting stuff down and just letting it regenerate from the stump. And I cut it down low enough. That way you don't want to cut it high because within a season it's out of the browse range of the deer. But I'll tell you, sassafras is huge in this area. I mean, the deer will just devour that as soon as it starts coming up. Even like a lot of the elm trees and the dogwoods and the redbuds, there's a lot of tonnage in that. As far as anything else, you know, I just try to get variety. I'm not real good with all the natives that are out there. I let them do their thing. But what people don't realize too is that you don't have to go in and plant native seeds either. I mean, there's a dormant seed bed in there. As long as you are careful when you're doing that, not to really disturb the soil on top, it's ready to go. Like all you got to do is supply the sunlight and let it rain on it, and it's going to take off. So I've got a lot of, in some of my areas, it's a lot of just submissive, like young growth of saplings, but the deer devour them. I mean, even if you got like young grapevine, I mean, they devour that and stuff on there. I've kind of battled with Cerisa lespedeza on my place. It was overrun with it, and so I'm seeing in some of my areas that I'm doing this, I'm seeing that start to pop up. So I'm gonna have to battle that, because I battled it in the open areas and the field areas, and by spraying and burning and stuff, I pretty much eliminated it there. But it's gonna be a different battle there inside the timber, and hopefully it's not. We'll just have to see what comes and what I have to do to get it taken care of. So it's a learning experience. It always is.
And that's the other thing too. And we just, we had a blog about it not that long ago, the invasives being a big part of it too. And, and, when you talk about opening the canopy, don't just go in and cut down the trees. Go in and really, first of all, use those local resources. I've got our district biologist coming out here before too long. I've got a couple acres of cattails that it's overrun, and a few cattails are fine, but cattails are like, they're the maple tree of the swamp. Like, it's an apex plant. Like it's literally, you can't even walk through it. And it's just on my property, it's 2 acres, but it's probably closer to 8 of just this contiguous sea of cattails. So having him come in, take a look at some of the options, but then, I've got a little bit more honeysuckle and a little bit more autumn olive than I'd really like to see. Some multiflora as well that I've been, we've only been here since November. So a lot of stuff, the leaves were already off, and was tough to see what I was dealing with, and had to wait for green up and really start to mark things through the spring and summer, so that as we get to this fall and winter, I can go through and try to get some of those out of there. I've got a lot of maple trees, but I'm lucky that they're not the Norway maples. They're the hard maples. So they're, if you're going to have maple trees, at least have the hard maples as opposed to the Norway, and some oak trees and some beech trees. It's a pretty good mix, really. But make sure, get rid of those. Say, even with the big, don't go in and cut down oak trees. That's just nonsense. And you see some guys do that just kind of indiscriminately, like you said, they rent a bulldozer for a weekend and take out 3/4 of an acre. And it might've been the best 3/4 of an acre of hardwood they had on their property in terms of native mast crop or whatever the case may be. And it's just, well, no, this is the best spot for a food plot. You can get a food plot to grow about anywhere if you really try. So, it's not easy, but like you said, the TSI, that's time and effort and sweat equity and that kind of side. So not near as bad. So with that said, like I said, we're early to mid-August right now. Seasons are anywhere from 5, maybe even 3 weeks 4 or 5. I'm more like 6 weeks away here in Indiana. But if guys saying, the summer got away from me, but I still want to do something before season opens up, what are their options to, it can't be a 3-week long project because you're butting right up against your season. But then B, if it's not going to be any good until next year, what's the point of even doing it? Just wait until later anyway. So what if anything are the kind of quick list of things that can happen over the next really 3 weeks before September 1st to really help improve hunting for this year still?
Yeah. That's tough. That's one of those kind of deals. It's like, you got to
it's going to vary so much from property to property.
Man, it is. It's good. Yeah. It's kind of one of those property to property things. Cause you go in and it just depends. Like if someone has a pretty open property as far as like field wise, yeah, you could probably go in and go, you know what? I want to create a little hot spot and I want to create a little food plot. Within a week, 2 weeks, you could create a little nice food plot in there. Now, if you're a guy that's got timber, that's all ran on timber on his property, getting in there, cutting down trees, doing all that, you probably aren't going to see the benefit from it. And anything, you might be doing more harm than good right now at this point. I mean, it depends if you go in and cut some probably some of the trees like dogwoods and stuff like that. You are going to bring some food down to their level, but are you going to bump them out of there at this point when you're so close to season? And people like that have a lot of timber that really don't have the option to go in and go, I'm going to put in a food plot. I would say scouting would probably be the largest thing that could improve like their chances. Get out there, walk your property, find those travel corridors, find those pinch points, put up your trail cameras, see what you got to hunt, if you got different properties. And like I said earlier, deer patterns are going to change a bunch right now. And I never worry about not having bucks. Usually I'm worried about the friends that are all bragging to me like, look at this bachelor group. I got, 10 bucks coming into my feed right now. I'm like, well, that's great. Have you ever killed a buck off your property? Like, no, I haven't. When season comes, they're gone. Well, I have a few bucks on my property, a few good ones, but when they start changing patterns, they all start coming here and we'll get a bunch on there. So I would say scouting would probably be the best tool for anybody right now at this point. And in case you're going to be too invasive in their areas, is just get out there, put some boots on the ground, walk through, find some good stand spots, scout, glass, put up trail cameras, that kind of thing is what I would probably be doing. I just did that on a recent property I went and picked up to urban piece. It's a decent chunk of urban in the middle of suburbia. It's like 45 acres. And first thing I did is like, I don't have time to go in there. I don't have time to do a food plot. I don't have time to figure out how to get these deer in. I can't, it's in Arkansas, so I will be able to bait during season, but I can't bait right now. And so even putting a trail camera up is pretty hard because you aren't going to really get anything unless you can put it over well-used trails. But I went in, I walked every single corner of that property, basically eliminating all the spots that I don't want to hunt and finding those key spots, finding like old sign from last year, finding their bedding areas and put that in my favor because come early season when I'm able to go in there and bait, I know exactly where I want to do that. I don't have to go chomp around and do all that kind of stuff. So putting a little time in right now is probably the best thing, just scouting wise, is what I would suggest to somebody.
Probably really good advice. The only other thing I'd add, like you said, if you got to get into your woods and really start hacking around at things, we've talked about on the podcast before, kind of having the layers of the property, right? You've got your kind of fringe areas, and then you got your deep core. I'm not doing anything that I'm not just on the fringes. We got one property that the southern edge of it is, they went in and bulldozed along a railroad track, and it's right up against some bedding, but we can get in there and mow that and get some seed down and that kind of, because I consider it's not a place that we hunt. It's a transition area for those deer. Anyway, it's not a core area. It's a transition area. So, kind of the same thought process you would use just in terms of going and being on the property in general. Don't go into those saving these spot locations right now. The changes that you need to make need to be on the edges, on the fringes. If you are going to try to get a food plot in, if you do want to get a jump on some, right now, I don't know, tell me what you think. I like this time of year, specifically on those locations, those kind of edge of property locations. I like getting a jump start on that edge feathering right now, because that's also a lot of times where those quick, easy and out stands are. And early season especially, we all do
Yeah.
this. We move stands in season. And we're like, yep, this is the spot. And it's when all the leaves are off and all the greenery's down. And then we go sit in on like October 9th, and it's like, good Lord, I can't see anything in here. So go into that spot now, climb up in that stand and look, and you're probably going to be able to pick out a couple shrubs or a couple small trees or somewhere where really it's mainly just like overdoing your shooting lane.
Right.
Trimming, which that's kind of what we get down to. Like I said, I always try to be done with my major stuff in the woods by 4th of July, and then I'll run through, and about September 1st we'll mow paths one more time and trim shooting lanes and try to be done then for that last month of September through until season opens. But when there is an edge like that where, like you said, if you're going to do some edge feathering anyway, or you're working on the edge of a food plot and along some stands like that, you can maybe get away with some there just because it's, like I said, you're not getting into those core areas and messing with them. And then it at least makes me feel like I did something. I don't know that I actually did, but at least make me feels like I did.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you on that. Yeah, we will be putting up tree stands here, moving some tree stands, clearing some street lanes. This month I go in real quick and just make sure my shooting lanes are cleared, and I will touch up on that. But like, great point, like you said, if you want to go in and you want to even create some of those, I know some people are against it, and I don't use it a whole lot. There are definitely certain circumstances where even hinge cutting is great. If you're going to hinge cut an area that's going to allow you to walk into your stand unseen, you're going to create browse at the same time you're doing that. But I mean, go in there and do some of that work. That's fine. Yeah. And if you do want to do edge feathering, great time to do it. You're right. I mean, it's something that's not going to be really invasive because you are on the edges, on the fringe, and you'd be surprised. You really don't bump out the deer. I mean, you might bump them out for that day or half a day or an hour or whatever, but they're back in there. As soon as you cut down those trees, they're at night, they're devouring them. And then you've got, especially at this point, if you're late summer, you're cutting down those trees, doing edge feathering, those leaves are going to hold on probably majority of the winter at this point because they die on that tree while they're green and they hold strong. That's really great bedding cover and sanctuary for those does hiding from bucks and everything. It could, help hold deer in that area on your property.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
So, I mean, with that said, like I said, we're 4 weeks, 6 weeks out. It's there. So what's on your schedule for this fall? Anything big, major planned?
Not major. I am going to do some filming this year, which is going to be kind of fun too. I am filming a hunt up in Canada. We're doing a pronghorn. I'm just filming on that one. We start at the end of this month. We go to Tennessee for the velvet hunt. And so that's the last weekend of this month is when we get started there. We'll be doing some public land hunting again in Nebraska. So that's going to be a state I travel out for. Tennessee, might be doing like South Dakota, kind of deal. So we are traveling a little bit, but going to be hunting Missouri and Arkansas, my home states here a bunch. So it's just kind of hard. I kind of focus on those two and hit the other ones when I can. It's just hard when I got 4 buck tags right now in 2 states that I can drive 30 minutes to and hunt them. It's hard to go, okay, I'm going to drive 6 hours and hunt for 3 days. So as I fill tags here, or if the hunting's just not great here, I'll start filtering out. And who knows?
Watch those forecasts. Just like planting food plots, watch those weather forecasts. It's 95 this weekend in Arkansas. It's going to be 62 in South Dakota. I know where I'm going.
Yeah, I've got all those tags on the weather app. It's like all these different towns, and you watch. You don't even wake up in the morning and just look at one. You're looking at 6 different states going, where do I need to be at this weekend? So,
no doubt. So for everybody that wants to follow along with that, for those that may not know, so where can people find you? Where can they find the Huntin Grounds? How can they stay up to date with all the latest from you for this fall?
Well, right now it's Instagram's huge for us at THGTV. YouTube, we'll be cranking out a lot of content this fall. So just the Huntin Grounds, and then Facebook at the Huntin Grounds, and we'll be out there producing a ton of content this year. So I've got Brayton, our cameraman, staffer, whatever, he's coming in at the end of this month. So get ready for a lot of content.
Beautiful. Can't wait to see it. Steven, appreciate you hopping on. Thanks for all the information. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Good luck this fall, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Appreciate it.